us all together. Lord, we gather in your name as children of a sovereign God. Forever we proclaim, to God be all glory.
Well, good morning. How you doing? It is Friday, December the 5th, 2025. Welcome to episode 524 of The Thinking Theologian as we continue our journey through the scriptures. So today we're at 2 Corinthians chapter 10 through 13. The title of today is God's Power Perfected in Our Weakness. The focal scripture is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, and this is what it says. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So being weak is usually not seen as something positive. This is especially true when it comes to men in almost every culture. We are taught that men must be tough, never complain, get the job done, and never show any weakness or emotion. Weakness results in ridicule and in most cases disdain from others. This is in the eyes of the world. Biblical weakness is not only needed, it is one of the best teachers that both men and women need in their spiritual lives. In today's reading, Paul is telling the church about what he has gone through. He explained to them that he has a thorn in the flesh, and he's asked God to take it from him. However, God responded that his grace was sufficient for Paul. It would get him through the struggle he was experiencing. Because Paul was weak, Christ would demonstrate his power in Paul in a tangible way. Now, Paul had a lot of attributes. He was very intelligent. He could do a lot of things. He was a Hebrew of Hebrews. He's an expert in the law, but yet God humbled him, and God gave him this thorn in the flesh of weakness where he had to rely upon the Lord of what was going on. And many scholars believe it was his eyesight. He was having a hard time writing, and that God gave him this weakness of the flesh to kind of bring him here where God could do a work in him. That's kind of a side note. And so Paul knew that the weaker he was, the more Christ would get the glory. So how do you view your weakness? As a believer, we should embrace our struggles. Why? Because when God does a work, we get to boast in him more and more. For instance, right now, I've had some struggles, and God is doing what only he can do in my life. This allows me to give God the glory. His power is the focus, not my weakness. I get to say, look at what God is doing in my life. And there have been several areas of weakness I've been struggling with right now where I've been struggling asking God to take it away, and he hasn't. And so it's been a little difficult at times, but it is what it is. And so if you have a weakness in your life right now, I challenge you to embrace it today. Pray for God to use that weakness to demonstrate his power. Paul knew that it's easy to get the glory yourself when things are going well. Our struggles are to teach us a lesson. They are to teach us that we are dependent upon the Lord in everything that we do. So if you are self-sufficient, you can put yourself in the place of God. And so a lot of people do. They elevate themselves in the place of God in the throne of their hearts where, I have all I need. I don't need God. God's nothing going on. And it's not saying you just worship God because things are bad in your life. But oftentimes things get bad so we can realize that we need someone who is stronger than us because we don't have it all together. And that's a dangerous place to be in your faith journey when you elevate yourself above God. Embrace your weakness and rely on the Lord to demonstrate his power in your life and be a testimony to others. So I challenge you to be a person who understands that God's power is perfected in weakness. As Paul went through these difficulties, and he realized that God was going to demonstrate and get the glory over what was going on. Because we go back and look what the verse says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in the weakness. So the weaker Paul was, the more glory God got. And that's where we should be when we struggle. The more glory God, the more weaker we are, the more glory God gets, especially when he uses us to accomplish things in our life. Because then again, he goes on there, says, therefore I will most gladly boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may reside in me. And this is a countercultural claim. Many people do not want to admit they have a weakness or they have struggle. I'm not saying you have to go into the details of everything that's going on in your personal life, about things you're struggling with, and give it out. And there should be some people in your life you share this with. You should have accountability partners, people you trust, that you say, these are some things I'm going through. But be confident that God will use your weakness for his glory, because this is how God is glorified, because he's using weak people to accomplish an impossible task. And that task is to bring glory to God and to share the gospel with other people. That is ultimately what's going on, what Paul was doing. He was a missionary, he was a preacher, he was explaining the gospel to others and training people up so they can do the same. And weakness was not something to be despised, but something to say, God's going to get the glory through this. So be encouraged by this today. So we finished up 2 Corinthians today. Tomorrow we'll be in Galatians chapter 1 through 3. Have a good day.